Okay, so you're thinking about becoming a music teacher.
Yeah, it's a pretty popular career choice.
It is. There's something about sharing your love of music with others. Really rewarding stuff, you know? And luckily, we've got RoleCatcher's Music Teacher, the complete career guide, to help us figure out how to make this a reality.
Yeah, it's a pretty competitive field though, right?
For sure, for sure. But this guide, it seems to really get into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to succeed.
And it really stresses a practice-based approach.
Oh, interesting. So less about just lecturing on theory.
Exactly. It's more about, well, think of a classroom, right? But it's buzzing with activity. Students are jamming together, experimenting with different
Oh,
genres.
I love that.
Yeah, and, they're finding their own voice through music. That's what it's all about.
That's so much more engaging than just like memorizing scales and stuff.
Right.
But I mean, the guide also mentions some challenges, right? Like high competition, for one.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole irregular income thing.
Yeah, that's the reality for a lot of starting music teachers.
So what does that actually look like? I mean, for someone just starting their career.
Well, you might find yourself juggling a bunch of gigs, like teaching at schools, doing community centers, maybe even giving private lessons, all just to, make ends meet.
Wow, so you're not just a teacher, you're practically an entrepreneur.
Basically, yeah. You got to hustle, build your own client base, be adaptable.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
This guide also mentions RoleCatcher's jobs module as a helpful tool. I mean, how is that different from, like, just scrolling through job boards online?
So imagine this, right? It's like having a personal assistant, but for your job search.
Okay, that's interesting.
Not only does it pull listings from all over the place, but it also helps you prioritize them.
Prioritize them. How so?
So it takes your skills, your experience, everything, and it's like, okay, these are the jobs that are the best fit for you. No more wasting time on applications that, might not even be a good match.
Wow, I could see that being super helpful, especially when you're already stressed about applications and interviews and all of that. And speaking of interviews, this guide really emphasizes prepping for those, and they highlight RoleCatcher's interviews feature. What's so special about that?
It's wild. It's like having a cheat sheet for your interview.
Oh,
It gives you access to this huge database of practice questions, but specifically for music teachers. And not just the questions themselves, but also insights into what those interviewers are really looking for.
so it's not just general interview advice, it's really tailored for music education.
Exactly. It's like laser focused.
That's huge.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the basics for a sec. When we talk about skills and qualifications, I mean, being a skilled musician is a given, right? But what else are those employers looking for?
So yeah, musical talent, that's obviously important. But you know what the guide actually ranks as a top skill?
What's that?
Instructing and speaking.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it really highlights how crucial it is to be able to communicate clearly and, in a way that's engaging, especially when you're explaining those tricky musical concepts to students. And that's across all levels, beginners to advanced.
So it's not just about being a virtuoso, it's about sharing that knowledge in a way that clicks.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about active listening? I mean, why is that so important when we're talking about music education?
Well, think about it. Active listening lets you really understand your students' needs. You can tailor your teaching, give them feedback that actually resonates. It's about building that trust,
Yeah.
creating a space where those students, they feel heard, like their ideas matter. And that's how you encourage them to really blossom.
It's amazing, though, I mean, how important those communication skills are. Maybe even more so than, like, raw musical talent in some cases.
Totally.
But how do you actually show that to employers? Like on paper.
Yeah.
It's not like you could just write good listener on a resume and call it a day.
Right. And that's where the guides suggest putting together a teaching portfolio.
Okay, a portfolio. What does that look like for, like, a music teacher?
So picture this, right? It's like a highlight reel of you as an educator.
Okay.
You could include lesson plans you've created, maybe testimonials from past students,
Testimonials? Good idea.
even recordings if you've guided some student performances. Oh, and original compositions if you're into that kind of thing.
Wow, so it's almost like a musical resume, but, like, way more in depth.
Exactly.
It really captures, like, your teaching style,
Yeah.
which is so important.
And speaking of resumes, RoleCatcher's platform,
Yeah.
it can actually analyze your traditional resume using AI,
Really?
and it'll point out things you might want to tweak.
Oh, that's cool. So, like, if I'm applying to a job that really emphasizes early childhood music education, the AI would know to, like, pick up on that.
Exactly. It might suggest that you highlight, any experience you have with younger kids.
Makes sense.
Maybe even like rephrase some bullet points just to match the language in that specific job description?
It's like having a little resume expert in your back pocket.
Right.
That's super helpful, especially in such a competitive field. So we've talked about prepping for interviews, spiffing up our resumes, but what about the bigger picture? Like actual career progression. Does the guide talk about that at all?
It does. It actually lays out like a typical career path for music teachers.
Oh, interesting.
Like the different stages, the different responsibilities.
Yeah, because it's one thing to like get that first job, which is amazing, but then it's like, where do you go from there?
Right. So it usually starts with like an entry-level position.
Entry level.
So you're assisting more senior educators, you're gaining experience with different genres, maybe even leading some small group lessons.
So you're really getting your feet wet.
Exactly.
And then what? You move up to like junior music teacher or something?
Yeah, something like that. As you get more experience, you get more independent.
You're trusted with developing your own curriculum, maybe even coordinating student performances or like leading an ensemble.
So that's a pretty big step up.
It is.
More responsibility, but also more freedom to like really shape your own teaching style.
Totally. And then, as you keep growing, you keep honing your skills, you become like the experienced music teacher.
I like that sound of that.
You're not just a good teacher at that point, you're also a mentor to the newer teachers coming up.
So you're shaping like the future of music education.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what's at the tippy top of this career ladder then?
So for those who really want to like lead and inspire on a larger scale, there's the senior music teacher position.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Think overseeing all of the music education for a whole district. Yeah. Leading like those big high-profile performances, maybe even collaborating with like professional musicians or big organizations.
Wow. Now that's what I call reaching a high note.
For sure.
But even at that level, the guide still emphasizes like never stop learning. Oh, absolutely.
Which, I mean, makes sense. It's music. It's always evolving. But what does that look like for like a seasoned music teacher,
Well, it could be anything from attending workshops to taking private lessons, maybe even with like a master musician.
Oh, wow.
Or even just like learning a new instrument.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, or diving into a genre you're not as familiar with. Just staying curious.
So as a music teacher, you never really stop being a student of music yourself.
Exactly.
That's really cool. But with all these different options, all these different paths you can take, I mean, how does someone even start to narrow it down?
It's definitely overwhelming. I get it.
It is.
And that's where RoleCatcher actually has this really cool tool called Career Compass.
Career Compass. That sounds interesting. Tell me more.
Okay, so it's basically like a personalized guide that uses all this data, right?
Right.
To recommend potential paths within music education. It factors in your skills, what you're interested in, even like your personality.
So it's really tailored to you. So let's say someone is super passionate about early childhood music education, and they also love incorporating like technology into their lessons.
Yeah, okay.
Would the Career Compass like take that into consideration?
Totally. It might suggest like, hey, maybe check out these schools or maybe look into these specific professional development programs. It just removes all the guesswork.
It gives you that roadmap.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I love that. But we've talked a lot about all these practical skills and career paths and stuff.
Yeah.
What about just like the qualities, beyond just the technical stuff? What makes a music teacher really exceptional?
That's a great question.
Like that special something,
Yeah. So obviously musical skills, those are important. Having a strong understanding of how people learn, that's huge.
Of course.
But it's those other qualities that really make a difference.
You're talking about things like passion, empathy,
Yes.
that spark that makes kids fall in love with music.
Exactly. Creating a space where they feel comfortable taking risks, trying new things, discovering their own like musical voice.
See, I think that's what makes music education so special, so unique.
Totally.
It's not about like memorizing facts.
It's about so much more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about fostering that passion, creating a lifelong love of music.
Exactly. And the best music teachers, they get that. They nurture that. They see beyond the notes on a page. They see potential.
So it's about shaping not just musicians, but well-rounded people
Yeah, absolutely.
who just appreciate music. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
So with all this in mind, how can an aspiring music teacher, someone who's listening to this right now, use everything we've talked about today to really set themselves up for success in this field?
Honestly, I think it just comes down to being proactive. Putting yourself out there, talking to other music educators, maybe finding a mentor you really click with, and of course, taking advantage of resources like RoleCatcher.
Because those tools can make a real difference.
Oh, for sure. It can help you fine-tune your skills, find those perfect opportunities, just make that whole journey a little smoother.
It's like having a guide in your corner.
Exactly.
It really is a beautiful blend, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
you need that practical side of things, but then there's this whole other element.
Totally. Like you can have all the technical skills in the world, right?
Yeah,
But if you don't have the heart for it, if you can't inspire those kids, it's not enough.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like RoleCatcher, they really provide those tools to kind of navigate like the business side of things,
Absolutely.
which then frees you up to like really focus on that passion.
Yeah, it's all about working smarter, not harder, right? Using
Yeah,
data to your advantage.
love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, what are some like key takeaways? Things that our listeners, especially those who are like really serious about becoming music teachers, should keep in mind?
I think, first and foremost, remember that it's more than just one thing.
You've got to have the musical skills, obviously, but you also need to know how to teach, how to communicate effectively. You've even got to be a bit of an entrepreneur, like we talked about.
It's a lot, but it's also, like, really exciting, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And honestly, never stop learning. Music changes constantly, so you have to as well.
That's such a good point. And hey, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? There are resources out there like RoleCatcher that can provide amazing guidance.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
So equip yourself and go make some music happen.
I love it. So, to all you music lovers out there, remember, it all starts with that one little spark, that passion. Nurture that, and you can achieve anything.
Here, here.
That's a wrap on today's deep dive. Until next time, happy music making, everyone.